So I was watching Thursday night football, and Carson Wentz and Justin Fields were in a game. It was not a very good game. If you did not see it, I'm pretty sure you heard about it. It was not good. Um, but one of the things that came into mind while watching these two quarterbacks, Justin Fields and Carson Wentz, is this question, right? So often, when things go wrong with the quarterback, especially, our first thing that we jump to is the coaching was bad or the team's not good enough, right? It seems like if you believe in a guy, and this is natural, you're going to put up every obstacle in place in order to stop yourself from making an honest evaluation of a player, right? We've seen this with Baker Mayfield, with Justin Fields, with Carson Wentz. You name any quarterback that has not had a great run of things, you will see a list of excuses, right? Offensive line isn't good enough. The coaching was bad. The system just wasn't a good fit. Oh, he was injured. But at some point, we have to give a fair evaluation of what we see on the football field, regardless of what other excuses may loom, especially for a position like quarterback, where it's important that you identify who's just a guy and who's a good quarterback, right? And so often we get caught in the minutia of these arguments that a guy like Carson Wentz gets 3 chances. You know what I mean? Or things linger longer than they should, and then they end up blowing up in the team's face. And I was watching Justin Fields, and I was asking myself this question. Because what was inarguable, if you watched the whole game, is that the Bears are not good. What also I felt like was inarguable in that game while watching it was Justin Fields, he's just not good right now. He had a couple of drives. He had that last drive he had was pretty good, even though he did not win the game on that final drive. I thought he made a good showing of it to get to the 5-yard line. Like, as bad as the offense and the team had been at that point, I was shocked that he even got there. But the rest of the game, he was pretty bad. And I know there's probably a good amount of Ohio State fans that watch me, so I'll try to be delicate here. But what I mean by he was pretty bad was you can tell that the coaching is trying to keep this passing game as simple as possible. They're keeping 2 wide receivers as options, 1 on each side. Justin has to just see which one's open and throw it there if he's not run. That's basically what they're telling Justin Fields to do. And I see 2 sides to this argument, and they're both extreme sides. And this is where I'm torn on it. On one side of the argument, you'll have people say he's done, he's garbage, a year and 6 games into his career, and that you're wasting time having him in there. And I think there is some merit to that. On the other side, you'll have people say, hey, he just doesn't have enough around him. If you put more around him, if you built the whole team around him, then he will be better. And I do think there's also merit in that, right? We've seen bad quarterbacks be propped up to a reasonable point to where they can be successful in the NFL. That happens all the time. And while I think both of those arguments have merit, I think there's a big flaw in both of them. With the prop a guy up argument, I think that you're arguing to have your team waste a lot of time. If we're just looking at this from a how can you win the Super Bowl standpoint, right? Because I just don't think right now, I think Justin Fields, he shows sparks of being an incredible quarterback, but I think he has some play-to-play issues that are going to prevent him from ever being a guy you can win a Super Bowl with. If you know that already, and you just spend all these resources trying to prop him up and make him look better than he is, you're still not going to win the Super Bowl. You might go to the second round of the playoffs. You might even go to the championship game, but I mean, look at how far the Jaguars got with Blake Bortles. You can argue that they almost got to the Super Bowl. They were 1 drive away, but there's a reason they were 1 drive away. because Blake Bortles isn't good. Same thing with that idea, right? You can build around the quarterback as much as you want. It is very rare that you win a Super Bowl in that kind of a situation. You have to get extraordinarily lucky with who you play, who's injured against who you play in the playoffs, and you have to have an extraordinary run from a quarterback who's otherwise not that, right? The last guy in the modern era of football that's really done it is Joe Flacco. Maybe you can argue Nick Foles, but even look at both of those paths, things opened up in a way that they did not open up previous for those guys. So Nick Foles especially, where I think he played Case Keenum in the championship game, in the NFC championship game. So yeah, it can happen. It's not very likely, and it's very likely that you're just going to waste time when you do that. So what do you do with a dude like Justin Fields, right? The signs are there to where, hey, man, if you give him a whole game, he'll give you 2 or 3 plays that are amazing. But throughout the game, I don't think he makes the offense any better. I think the Bears would have won that game if they had a different quarterback. Not Trevor Siemian, but if they had who's a good guy to throw in there that's just pretty average. Let's say if they had Taylor Heineke, I think they probably win that game by a couple touchdowns. I think the offense is better than what it looks like most of the time with Justin Fields. But I do believe Justin Fields probably gives you the best chance to have explosive plays. Again, it's an interesting conundrum, right? What do you do with the quarterback like that? And I think that's the question that NFL teams are asking themselves is what do we do with these quarterbacks that are good enough to start and good enough to win games with, but aren't good enough to get over the hump versus the elite guys? And what we have seen in the NFL is there are more elite quarterbacks than ever. And when there are, because it used to be Peyton Manning was elite, Drew Brees was elite, Aaron Rodgers was elite, and then everybody else was like really good. And Tom Brady, of course, Tom Brady, right? But there wasn't like 8 elite quarterbacks where the top 10 is legitimately hard to take guys in and out of. You know, it wasn't what it is now. And even now, what makes you an elite quarterback is so much more ridiculous than what made you it before. Patrick Mahomes is a literal alien. Josh Allen is a literal alien. Lamar Jackson is a literal alien. Like, we are seeing these dudes do on a weekly basis stuff we've never seen done on a football field before. And when that gap between quarterback play keeps widening, right, where you have guys who are not just elite, but like insane elite, and then you have guys who are just normal elite, right? And then you have guys who are good enough to win with. It used to be the good enough to win with guys you can win a Super Bowl with. But unless things fall in your way, like it did for the Rams, right, where Matt Stafford has always been a good enough to win with guy, you know, if you have the right things around him. But even then, he ended up, because the Bengals got lucky playing the Bengals, who we can all agree probably weren't the best team in the AFC, but they were the team that got there, right? If they played the Chiefs in that Super Bowl, I'm pretty sure the Chiefs will probably beat the Rams. Bengal fans ain't gonna like that, but that's how I feel about it. And Bengal fans have an argument there. Let me be clear, because you did beat them twice, all this stuff. Now, I'm just saying the Chiefs match up better with the Rams is my point. They got fortunate with the better matchup, right? They have a great defensive line that year. The Bengals did not. Again, you need to get fortunate to win a Super Bowl with a not great quarterback. And you need to get fortunate to win it with Tom Brady. And that's my point, right, with Justin Fields, is what do you do with a guy like him where he's not really going to be good enough? And this is with Kenny Pickett. This is with a lot of quarterbacks, Tua, Jalen Hurts. What do you do with dudes like them, especially if you're in the AFC, when you don't believe they're better than any quarterback you're going to play in the second or championship round of a playoff game? What do you do? Do you keep developing them for a couple more years, or is it easier just to pull the trigger? What's better for football is also another question, right? What's better for the game overall? Is it good for the game? I don't think it's good for the game if we give up on guys like Justin Fields 2 years into their career and just kind of throw them aside and they never develop into anything, right? That means there's going to be either it's going to be the have and have nots, which has already been, but it's going to be more extreme, right? That's not good for the game if we keep giving up on these quarterbacks, but it's not good for your team individually if you keep sticking with these quarterbacks who just aren't that good. What would make the most sense for the Bears is probably need to move on. If I were Pittsburgh and I had a chance to draft Bryce Young or CJ Stroud, I would do it because the chances of them becoming one of those guys, those elite guys, versus Kenny Pickett, astronomically different. The chances of CJ Stroud or Bryce Young becoming one of those elite guys, extremely higher than Justin Fields, right? About as high as Kenny Pickett, right? And then we can even go to next year, Caleb Williams, Quinn Ewers. I would take both of those guys, all four of those guys, over those quarterbacks I just mentioned. Even Jalen Hurts, even Tua Tagovailoa. So what do you do with those quarterbacks? Do you keep them around? Is there a reason to have a mid-range quarterback? And I know the original point of this video was, is it the coaching or is it the player? But I guess my main point overall is you just know sometimes when a player is good. We put a lot of stuff on coaching, and coaching does matter in the margins. But if you're going to be an elite player, you're able to overcome coaching. Joe Burrow got the worst coach in football. And look, there's some points where you can say he's not overcoming. He went to the Super Bowl with the worst coach in football, in my opinion. You can overcome bad coaching if you're good enough. If you're on the margins, though, then it's hard. But if you're a quarterback on the margins, what do you do with that as a team? You can say, yeah, we haven't supported him enough to get him to his max potential, but what does that actually do for us anyways if he does get to the max potential? Because that's not necessarily a quarterback who we feel good about winning a Super Bowl with. The league's changing. This is one of the ways they're changing, and I'm interested to see how far this goes.